Commissioner, Mr. Keno, good to see you. I have a hypothetical question for you. If a designated public office holder like a minister had a financial interest in a company like Telesat, and Telesat, which just received a more than $2 billion loan from the government just days ago, would that minister need to have recused themselves? What would that look like for that minister with that interest in Telesat?
You're asking me, as usual, sorry, not as usual, as you have before, theoretical questions. I gladly answer a factual question. A theoretical one, you'll have to give me far more detailed facts before I can answer. You say
okay.
There was a grant to Telesat.
Sure.
By who? By cabinet decision? On what base? Under what authority? Who was the minister, etc.?
So, just this past week, Justin Trudeau announced that Mark Carbon Tax Carney is going to be advising him on all matters finance. And days after, a company that Mr. Carney has a financial interest in received $2.14 billion in an announcement by the Prime Minister. Mr. Carney has been hired by the Liberal Party, it appears, to avoid the scrutiny of the Conflict of Interest Act. Does this present as skirting of the? It clearly presents as a problem to Canadians. Is Mr. Carney a ministerial advisor by the definition set out in the Act?
No, because he is advising the Liberal Party. What the Liberal Party does or does not is not government action. The government may adopt the advice that was given by Mr. Carney, but it's in effect they're adopting the advice of the Liberal Party who got it from Mr. Carney. It's the way they structured it right now. He is not a ministerial advisor. So
it's an appropriate practice then for parties to provide, we would imagine, non-public information, for the government to provide non-public information to their employees at the party when those employees have serious financial positions in companies that could stand to benefit from that information.
Well, the party gathers information from all sorts of sources, etc. They can pay for it, they can get it for free, etc. They then use that information in order to position themselves and decide on their policy. That is a perfectly normal procedure. There's nothing of conflict of interest here.
So there's no conflict if Mr. Carney receives non-public information from the Department of Finance and then uses that to provide advice to the government because he's employed by the party and not paid by taxpayers, though the advice that he provides could materially benefit him and his other.
Your supposition is that he receives non-public inside information from the Department of Finance.
Point of order, Chair.
That that's just a supposition you make. I have no proof of that. If that is
excuse me, Commissioner.
The case, that would be a different situation.
We have a point of order. I'll just...
Sorry to interrupt, Commissioner, but I just find it a little bit troubling that Mr. Barrett hasn't asked a single question about SDTCs using hypotheticals to ask the witness a question, which is great, but it's not what we heard to study. My understanding, I know he supports, world-dominating billionaires, but that rather than Canadian companies, but that's not my... that's not the axe that he should be grinding today. It's SDTC.
Is it a point of order?
It's relevance.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. And I accept your point of order in that we had a 1064 meeting to call for this 3-hour special meeting to discuss the Commissioner's report on SDTC. So I'd ask you, Mr. Barrett, although I am generous in terms of the questions that can ask, to try to be relevant to the topic for which you had a whole lot of resources deployed this summer to bring this meeting forward specifically about this topic. So please keep those rules in mind. You know the rules of relevance. And I'll yield the floor to you back. You have a minute and a half.
I agree that Mr. Turnbull is quite troubled, Chair, as he stated. When we're talking about conflicts of interest like Ms. Verscherian, you can check the box there, Ryan, Randy Boissonneau's company, Global Health Imports, was given $30,000 on December 30th, 2023. Minister Boissonneau was a 50% partner in that company. Were you aware of that?
Sorry, when was
Point
it
of
given?
order.
Yes, Mr. Turnbull.
I thought the topic for this meeting was SDTC. Is the
I'll bring
witness
it-
answering questions on
I'll bring it
any
back.
topic that Mr.
That
Barrett
was
so
15
chooses,
seconds.
or is this an actual focused discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. And yes, I agree with that point of order. Mr. Barrett, keep it on the topic of the meeting, please. Thank you.
It was December 30th.
That was a company you're talking about, the contract from Election Canada?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. It was in a company in which he was an owner. At that point, he is no longer an owner of that. Just being an owner in a company, he had no involvement with the operation of the company. We have looked, as you know, at his involvement.
But were you aware at the time that that had occurred?
No. It came out, I read it in the press as you, but I'm sorry, in Elections Canada was buying, I think, masks or gloves or something like that for $30,000 through
Is it not a violation of Section 13, Sub 2 of the Act?
How is it a violation? He's not running a company. Can he not?
It says they can't have an interest in a partnership or private corporation that's party to a contract with a public sector entity.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. That's all the time you had.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner, at committee in July, you indicated that you had in your possession and were reviewing 9 text messages from Randy Boissonneau's business partner, Anderson, 9 of which name a Randy, and 1 of which places this Randy in Vancouver at, coincidentally, the very same time that the Liberal cabinet was meeting.
Relevance. Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Mr. Cooper, there is a point of order that has been brought. It's been discussed before. I would encourage you, I will ask you to stay on the topic that we're discussing. However, if this topic is of interest, you can always bring it up at other committees or on a 1064, just like it was done for this committee to meet on SDTC. I find it a little disrespectful to the time of the committee that you would be.
Just if I may reply to the point of order, the question, I haven't even had a chance to pose my question. If I had been given that opportunity, it would be apparent that it is in fact tied to the issue before this committee.
Okay, well, please tie it to the matter at hand.
Yes, because it goes to a question about whether, Commissioner, now that you have the 9 text messages naming Mr. Boissonneau or a Randy, we have not 1 smoking gun, but 9 smoking guns. So since July, have you opened an investigation into Randy Boissonneau contravening the Conflict of Interest Act?
Point of order. That is not relevant to the topic at hand, Chair. That has nothing to do with SDTC, which is the topic of the meeting today. I know Mr. Cooper and his Conservative colleagues have a hard time reading the motion, perhaps, but this is on SDTC.
The commissioner
I know
said...
Mr. Cooper doesn't like hearing from me because we've had many battles for many committees, but this is not relevant.
I know Mr. Turnbull wants to cover up...
Mr. Cooper, you don't have the floor. I've listened to the point of order brought forward, and it's, again, the same thing. It goes to relevance. I'm very liberal in how I interpret the topics that are discussed. I'm generous. However, I can't tie it to the subject at hand. And Mr. Perkins, with colleagues, brought us in the summer on a 1064 to take 3 hours of the committee time to discuss SDTC. I'd like for us to discuss SDTC, so please, Mr. Cooper.
Commissioner, are you investigating Mr. Boissonneau for violating the Conflict of Interest Act?
No.
You're not. Now, going back to the study at hand, you said, Commissioner, that what is the point? What is the point of investigating someone like Ms. Verscheren, who is no longer in her position? Here you have a sitting minister who potentially violated the Conflict of Interest Act with not 1, not 2, but 9 smoking guns, and 2 months later, you haven't bothered to do anything further. Is that what you're telling this committee?
First of all, as you know, before I investigate, I have to have reasonable grounds to investigate. What you have here is a bunch of emails. Can I finish?
9 emails that name a Randy, one that just coincidentally happens to connect him to being in Vancouver, and you say you don't have any grounds. I'm just shocked at the lack of interest, the lack of curiosity of a sitting minister who may have contravened the Conflict of Interest Act.
Mr. Cooper, I'll ask you to let the witness. I'll ask you to let the witness respond. But at the same time, this is so far from what we're supposed to be studying, Mr. Cooper. Have you read?
What's the point?
Have you read the motion?
He said that with respect to Ms. Verscheren. Now I'm talking about a minister who's in his office, and he's not interested in investigating the minister. He's not interested in investigating Ms. Verscheren. He's not interested in investigating the minister. What is he interested in investigating?
Yes,
is he interested in actually enforcing the conflict of interest act?
Mr. Cooper, I understand you're not a regular member of this committee. I'd appreciate if maybe the Vice Chair, Mr. Perkins, could brief you on how we do things around this committee. But we don't interrupt each other. We don't interrupt the chair for one, and we talk when we have the floor. I haven't given you the floor. There's a point of order that's been raised, a very valid one, on relevance, and I think your questions are just not relevant.
I know Mr. Turnbull wants to run interference to protect Randy Bosno, and it appears you do too as well, Chair.
Mr. Cooper, well, that is just however, peu importe, Monsieur Cooper, comment vous voulez l'exprimer. Moi,
regardless of how you put it, Mr. Cooper, I don't really care what subject you're wanting to pursue here. The committee is sovereign. If you want to pursue this topic, that's fine with me, but there's to be a motion voted in by the committee to determine that that would be the course of action.
If questions you're asking, the Commissioner, we can. We just need to adopt a motion in that direction. This is not what we're supposed to be studying today. That's as easy as that. Madam Jones, on your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And of course, my point of order is on relevance for probably the third time since we started the committee with some of the same speakers that have had to be raised. I just want to note for the record that there is always opportunity to approach the Commissioner on other issues outside of the committee forum, and today we're discussing a very different matter. So the Commissioner is here to answer questions on that matter. It is of vital importance to the committee, and I would really appreciate it if members could stick to the study and the topic that we're debating.
I agree, and so I'll ask you, Mr. Cooper, you still have 2 minutes 56 seconds to stay on the topic, and if you haven't seen the notice of motion, or if your fellow members haven't shared it with you, please have a look at it. We came here during the summer on a 106.4 for that very special meeting. So, Mr. Cooper. Yes, Mr. Barrett.
So you had instructed me to perhaps consult the notice of motion to confirm it hadn't changed, and the direction that Mr. Cooper went to deal with the analogous situation between what Mr. Perkins had raised and the response from the Commissioner, and the comparison to another decision of the witness. Was what we were looking at. I checked. The notice of motion is exactly the one that was passed in the summer, based on the motion that was passed at the 106.4 meeting in the summer. So you can rest assured that I did read it, and I understand that the standing orders are the same at all of the committees. So I appreciate the guidance on and being welcomed here. But with respect, Chair, the analogy that Mr. Cooper was drawing is absolutely not any further than the analogy that Mr. Turnbull was to drawing to SDTC in the House, which did not deal with the conflict of interest that we're talking about with Ms. Verscheren. So equal opportunity to draw analogies or to deal with subjects related to would be appreciated. That's all that we're looking for. But I can assure you, we were well consulted, and Mr. Perkins briefed us very well on the standard operating procedures here at your committee.
Appreciate that, Mr. Massey. Did you have something to add on this point of order?
Yeah, just a clarification of how much time we have left. I know the Conservatives are filibustering each other at the moment, but at the same time, we only have the witness here for a certain amount of time. I wanted to confirm how much time we have left in that.
Well, it depends. We have about until 4:35 with the witness. The points of order have eaten up a lot of time, but I can still give a minute to Mr. Cooper, and then or to Mr. Brock if he wants.
Well, I'll turn it over to Mr. Brock.
Well, it depends. The time we're taking with the commissioner will eat on the time we have with Madame Verschuren, which I think is of interest to the committee. Mr. Brock, go ahead.
For your appearance, I want to drill down and set the stage for Ms. Verschuren's appearance on the issue of her knowledge of recusal versus abstention. Now, she said quite proudly when she testified on the 12th and 14th of December 2023 that she's been a board member on various boards since she was 38 years of age. She's extremely familiar with conflict of interest policies. She's recused herself on numerous occasions. And then she said very proudly, I am sure that I didn't break ethics laws. That was December 14th, 2023, before the release of your report. Now, I know that she spoke with a compliance officer in your office on June the 4th, 2019. Obviously, the issues of recusal and abstention were discussed. So clearly, Commissioner, you weren't the compliance officer that she spoke with. Is that accurate? Okay. Are you satisfied that consistently your compliance officers would have explained in simple language the clear distinction between abstention and recusal?
I cannot answer. The only record we have is that she called and spoke to one of my officers. Unfortunately, that officer has since left, and the email in which she reported what her conversation with Ms. Verschuren is no longer there, because we erased it once she left. So I honestly don't know what she discussed, to what extent she explained to what they talked about. All I know, it was a very short conversation between her and one of my officers.
Okay. But you'd have no reason to suggest that for any particular reason that compliance officer would have deviated against your office's policies in terms of having that discussion with order and council appointments?
If Mrs. Verschuren had asked, what does recusal mean, she would have been told, leave the room. There's no question about it. Did she ask? I don't know. I have no evidence what the conversation was about and what it concerned. I mean, when a public officer is newly appointed, they may have all sorts of concerns, and that's why they phone us. It's unfortunate that I have no record of what was discussed.
Because I'm referring to page 30 of your report, paragraph 141, where you talk about the distinction between the two terms as explained in the Morneau 2 report. Very simple language. I think moving forward, you might want to, as a suggestion, it's obviously entirely up to you, Commissioner, but as a suggestion for future discussions with these appointees, having that simple language explained in light of the classic examples that she demonstrated, where she took legal advice as opposed to stating to you that she understood her compliance with not only policy, SDTC policy, but the Conflict of Interest Act were paramount. She's now relying upon extremely poor legal advice.
Thank you, Mr.
So I think it would be helpful in the future that that distinction is made known to all of those appointees.
As I remark, we just issued an information notice to everybody exactly on that point, and in plain language. Recusal means leave the room, physically or virtually.
Right.
You know, I can't say it cleaner than that.
I agree. Thank you.
Ms. Verschuren, the Commissioner's office just testified, just to be clear, that there are 24 conflicts of interest. You did, not 2. So, but I want to go back to my question on how you were appointed. You said that you didn't apply, that the Liberal Minister of Industry approached you and you had 2 conversations with him to do that. But we also have testimony here from the Liberal Minister of Industry, who said he was given a list from the Privy Council office, and that's who he contacted. And the Privy Council office, head of appointments, who was in place when you were appointed, said that she supplied 6 names to Minister Baines on that. And when asked if anyone had ever been appointed without being on that list, she said no, not that she was aware of. So but you didn't apply. So I have no idea how you would have got on the list that Minister Baines then went and checked out. So who misled the committee? Minister Baines and the Prime Minister's Department, the PCO, and appointments, and saying that you applied, or you, and saying you never applied?
Mr. Chair, I believe the situation was that there was indications that I was requested to consider to be an applicant to this. I'm sure that the Privy Council office would have looked at a number of applicants. I would expect.
Okay. Ma'am, let's move to a different question. In your opening statement, you said repeatedly that the Ethics Commissioner said you acted in good faith. So are those your words or his? Because I looked through his report. I read it before, and I trust you did too. It says good faith in there one time, but it's not in this report talking about you being found guilty of this corruption. But it's not, that good faith phrase isn't about you. So why would you make that up? Why would you assert that in your opening statement today? He didn't say you were acting in good faith.
Mr. Chair, we just heard from the Commissioner, and I accept his findings.
Okay. So, ma'am, if you accept his findings, you'll recognize that in his findings, he didn't say that you acted in good faith. How many Canadian tax dollars were given out in conflicts of interest by Liberal-appointed board members at Sustainable Development Technologies Canada? How much money? Just the number would be helpful.
The total amount of money?
Yeah, the Auditor General pegged the number at $330 million given out in conflicts of interest. Do you dispute that number?
The Auditor General stated that number. It's obvious that that is accurate.
So you agree? So, ma'am, are you proud of your time at Justin Trudeau's Green Slush Fund? It's a yes or no question.
The investments that SDTC made into the clean tech industry has had an enormous impact on
proud?
Canada. I'm very proud of the work that SDTC has done, yes.
Are you proud of the $300 million given out in conflicts of interest? Are you proud of the 24 instances of your own conflicts of interest? Are you proud that you used your position to help enrich yourself and your friends?
Again, I accept the Commissioner's findings. I recognize that there were two things that I could have been approved on in terms of that designation of recusing versus abstaining.
Okay, so I've got about 30 seconds left. I've got to say I'm not sure what's worse, that you didn't report the governance issues and demand change as chair of the board, or that it seems like you don't really think that you did anything wrong. So I have one question to finish my time. When will you return the money that you took from the Green Slush Fund?
Pay it back.
Mr. Chair, I've been accountable, and people in public service in these positions need to be accountable. And I have been involved with 4 different reports. I have made myself available. None of these experts come to that conclusion. And again, the other major issue is that those investments were made in projects in Canada that really has grown the economy.
Okay, thank you, MP Van Bynen.